Dawn light glinted across the city's glass towers as the skyline held still. A few residents gathered on a rooftop and watched the street below. The unknown woman paused and looked toward a growing, distant rumble. Sudden shapes fell into the avenue as creatures tore through glass panes. The crowd shrieked and scattered while blood and debris filled the street. Soldiers and civilians collapsed under a torrent of red energy and claws. Amid the wreckage, the red-eyed figure rose and fixed a silent promise. Blood trailed across asphalt, and the night closed around a fallen city. 7 years later, dawn fell over the ruined plaza and the memorial stones. A lone figure sat against a monument and watched the city wake in silence. He muttered names while an off-panel voice assigned one recruit the name Frank and relieved another from the training center. The square stayed empty, except for distant noises and scorch marks on stone. The man closed his eyes and then opened them to show sharp blue eyes. He rose and accepted the changed orders with quiet, steady resolve. 7 years after the city fell, officers stood in the training center and called names aloud. A burly trainer spoke to the seated recruit and delivered blunt orders and praise. The young man listened, then closed his eyes and opened them to reveal blue eyes. The trainer acknowledged the 7 years and said the youth's talent exceeded ordinary recruits. Recruits were named, organized, and marched across the plaza under strict cadence and watchful eyes. The square filled with moving figures, while a voice assigned roles and relieved trainees. The youth stayed a moment longer, resolve hardening, then accepted changed orders quietly. He walked away alone down the ruined promenade, shoulders squared against morning light. A hand crushed a small metal can under the morning's bright light. The unknown youth crouched on the pavement and gasped for breath with weary disbelief. He mouthed the single word, "How?" and could not immediately answer the question. Nearby, an unknown woman cradled a small helmeted child and spoke soft encouragement. She praised the child's bravery and warned gently to keep moving forward. Other residents lingered in the square, offering measured relief and quiet thanks. The youth watched their brief comfort and let a small thread of hope grow. After the brief comfort in the square, the unknown youth rose from the pavement. He pushed through pain and staggered to his feet and began to run. He kept repeating he would not give up as he sprinted past empty avenues. The skyline loomed ahead, and the city felt distant under muted light. Later rain fell over a quiet block, and streetlights hummed above puddles. He reached a narrow doorway, then hesitated a moment on the threshold. Then he stepped inside, carrying the small hope that had started to grow. After a brief rest in the square, the unknown youth rose and ran. He pushed through pain and slipped into a narrow doorway at dusk. Inside, a man confronted him angrily and poured out bitter accusations loudly. The man seized the youth and demanded answers while rain slid down windows. The youth tried to explain and cried that this was not about money. The man snarled, then struck and flung him across the room with brutal force. The youth hit the floor, and the man spat the single word, "Bullshit." Unknown youth slammed against stone and snow as the angry man shoved him from the doorway. A mocking laugh cut the cold as the angry man leaned forward and spat a question. Unknown youth met the words with stunned pain and called the man a bastard. He stumbled across a ledge and fell into the snow under the street lamps. Alone and wounded, he recalled a trait that set him apart from others. He thought if he had talent, then things might have shifted in his favor. After being shoved into the snow earlier, unknown youth sank beneath icy water and struggled. A blue caption proclaimed the Tower of Trials would test his iron will. He gasped and broke the surface, startling at a sudden power surge within him. A distant rooftop cry of "Save me" split the night. Somewhere a man crashed through a ceiling and debris scattered below. On a rain-soaked rooftop, a figure lay motionless under streetlights. He remembered the trait that set him apart and hoped it could change the outcome. Unknown youth fought up through freezing currents and burst from the water coughing as rain beat down. Energy flared inside him and lit the surrounding bubbles. A blue tower announcement declared the selection of survivors and the Dominator's fifth gate. A vertical beam of light gripped him and dragged him skyward. Panic gave way to focus as he recalled the trait that marked him and steadied his resolve. He vowed not to fail and hoped that secret might change his fate as the tower carried him higher. After surfacing and being lifted by the tower, the unknown youth faced a glowing interface prompting a difficulty selection. He did not understand the system, but felt instincts pushing him toward risk. The menu offered easy, normal, and hard, and he decided to seize the chance despite uncertainty. A vertical beam responded as he committed, hauling him upward while the screen flashed rewards and warnings. Pain and pressure battered him during ascent. He steadied his breath, clung to resolve, and prepared for whatever trials the tower chose. Unknown youth emerged higher than the desert and fell toward a wide, empty plain. The interface continued to display blue boxes with rules and system notes. It announced that a weapon would be provided for the unfolding trial. It stated the trial's objective plainly as survival under strict conditions. A single sword then appeared, plunging into the sand nearby. Unknown youth stood motionless and read the final warning about death and removal. The tower's terms had been set, and unknown youth braced for choice. Unknown youth clenched his jaw and wondered if he had a unique trait. He scanned the empty city and remembered the interface's rules and the promised weapon. A single sword had plunged into the sand nearby earlier, and the trial's goal had been declared plainly. He stood and tested his limbs, bracing himself for the coming choice. He sprinted across the sun-baked ground and leaped high toward a distant ridge. Sand exploded beneath his feet as he landed and rolled to absorb the impact. The interface announced that the tutorial trial would begin, and the youth braced. The interface declared the Tower of Trial's difficulty as hard and reported one sand golem had appeared. The sand creature erupted from the dune, stone scales grinding as it advanced. The youth stared and muttered that it was crazy, then ran toward the fight. Sand exploded beneath his feet as he leaped and rolled to avoid the creature's strikes. The interface reminded him to survive the encounter. He drew his weapon and slammed it into the ground. The impact produced a sudden blue light spreading beneath his feet. Unknown youth felt the blue light surge beneath his feet and froze in shock. He widened his eyes and coughed through a nervous breath. Sweat tracked down his face as he watched a holographic panel materialize. The system interface presented its message in stark blue letters and no mercy. Huge block text declared the trial's penalty in blunt red letters: death. The realization hit him, his legs trembled and his pulse spiked. He searched for options and steadied his grip on the weapon. Each second narrowed his choices and forced him to act. Unknown youth felt the interface's blue light surge and froze as a panel announced the trial. The system selected Tower of Trials, difficulty hard, and reported sand golems had appeared. The creatures emerged from the sand with grinding stones and glowing eyes. A countdown displayed remaining time 3 minutes 59 seconds and pulsed insistently. He remembered the system's red penalty text and realized failure would mean death. He rolled aside as a massive fist smashed into the ground nearby. Staggering to his feet, he cursed and chose movement over thought to survive. Unknown youth was slammed into the sand by a crushing blow and rolled across the ground. He cried out as the shock knocked him down and dust filled the air. The interface flashed a stark message: trial failure penalty, death. He stared at the blue panel and felt cold fear tighten his chest. Pain and panic battled with a raw will to survive. Sand golems' impacts echoed nearby as rubble rained. He forced himself upright, breath ragged, and chose action over despair to keep moving. Unknown youth had been knocked down earlier and felt the trial penalties chill inside him. Sand golems continued their assault, and one charged with stomping steps that shattered sand. The interface's blue warning hovered in the air, but offered no mercy or aid. He forced himself up, gripping a small blade, and tasted fear as heat built. He sprinted toward open ground, dodging rubble while the golem crashed down behind. Each motion cost him pain, but also bought a narrow chance at survival. He braced his blade and prepared to meet the creature despite his doubt. Unknown Youth had pushed into open ground while sand golems advanced, and shadowed voices from the crowd taunted him. A towering sand golem brought its foot down with shattering force. He sprinted, dove beneath the crushing soul, and felt sand and debris explode around him. He cried no as pain flared, and the trial penalty bit him, then planted his blade against the golem's limb and slashed upward. The strike made the golem stagger and throw up a cloud of sand, buying him a narrow chance to catch his breath and keep fighting. Unknown Youth had already forced a stagger in the sand golem and bought himself a narrow chance. He decided to make the target easier to reach and moved to the base. He kicked sand and stones loose to undermine the golem's footing and balance. A surge of sand and rock tore from the dune and struck the construct's limb. He seized the opening, grabbed a limb, and forced the golem to topple off its feet. The collapse threw a cloud of dust and scattering rock across the ridge and valley. Unknown Youth was hurled and landed hard amid rubble, bleeding and gasping for air. Unknown Youth had already weakened the sand golem and crawled toward its exposed limb despite his wounds. He pumped his legs and sprinted up the dune under blowing sand. He lunged and grabbed the golem's lower arm while shouting that he could reach. He ignited a pair of energy blades and sliced at the joint with precise strikes. Sparks and fractured stone burst from the wound as the construct's balance failed. He followed with an overhead swing that severed connections and forced the golem to collapse into dust. Unknown Youth had already weakened the sand golems and driven one limb exposed. A burst of crimson light shattered from the wreckage and scattered rock. Fragments stung his face and knocked him down onto the sand. He forced himself upright and spat blood. The remaining mass swung with brutal momentum. He lunged and slashed at the joint once more, but the impact caught him full. Pain flared and he collapsed amid dust and splinters. He screamed as bone and sand mixed in his mouth. The wreckage smoked and glowed faintly. From just beyond the ruin, a voice said, "I knew it." Unknown Youth lay injured among splinters and sand beneath the roaring red face. The monsters circled him and spat insults that dismissed his worth and effort. They called him unfortunate and stupid and claimed he did not know his place. Blood stung his mouth, and the blade nearby glinted with fresh crimson. He begged for them to stop, but his voice broke on the wind. Blue light flared in his eyes, and a raw roar tore from him. He shouted and swung the sword down into the sand and ruin. The strike met resistance, and metal buried itself with a wet sound. Unknown Youth pushed past pain and drove his sword down into sand and shattered stone. Blue energy climbed the blade and flashed outward along the strike. The force met the sand golem's core, and lightning tore through its face. The creature's eyes flared, and its jaw opened as rock split and debris cascaded. The core collapsed into fragments, and the battlefield filled with falling stone. The interface overlaid the scene, announced the core's destruction, displayed remaining time, and confirmed the tutorial trial was complete. Silence followed as the result registered across the courtyard. Unknown Youth had driven his sword into sand and stone as blue energy raced along the blade. The strike met the sand golem's core, and lightning tore through the creature, while rock split and debris cascaded. The interface overlaid data, announced the core's collapse, displayed remaining time, and confirmed the trial's end. Silence settled on the courtyard. Under the harsh sun, the youth knelt, bleeding and stunned, then rose, braced his sword, and hearing only the system messages, breathed the words, "I survived." The interface announced the trial's end and layered reward messages across the silent courtyard. It added bonus points and delivered a rating while the youth remained kneeling, bloodied and dazed. Then the system declared that he had unlocked a unique trait and granted a new status. Dark figures watched from below, their eyes bright against the shadow. Energy coalesced around the youth, and light pulsed through his body as he steadied his sword. His eyes shifted to an unfamiliar vivid color, and he murmured a puzzled sound. The youth remained kneeling as dark energy spiraled around him and shadow teeth formed. The interface displayed bright blue prompts and announced a unique trait unlocked for him. A confirmation window waited while light pulsed through his body and his right eye shifted color. Red tendrils erupted and lashed outward, tearing cloth and streaking the air. The red-eyed figure and distant monsters watched from the shadows below. The youth screamed and clutched his chest as the system logged his new status. The unknown youth stared upward as his right eye flashed bright blue in pain. A translucent interface window appeared asking if he would absorb the sand golem's spirit. Before he could answer, black and red tendrils erupted and lashed outward. They tore at his clothes and whipped the air violently around him. The unknown youth found himself lifted and suspended by the writhing strands. He screamed as the dark energy coalesced and his pupils shifted color. The red-eyed figure and monsters remained hidden observers from below the rooftop. The interface lingered awaiting confirmation while the spirit's tendrils tightened around him. The interface confirmed the absorption and reported a 7% proficiency increase. The black tendrils had coalesced into a burning core inside the unknown youth's chest. He writhed as pain flared and red energy spilled along his ribs and throat. His pupils shifted and light leaked from the wound while he gasped aloud. He managed fractured sounds, hiok, then an uncertain awe escaped him. The red-eyed figure and monsters watched unseen from below the rooftop edge. The interface hovered, still waiting for any further confirmation or command input. The interface confirmed one spirit absorbed and displayed progress on its blue panel. A burning red orb coalesced above the unknown youth's chest and pulsed with heat. He felt the spirit's presence move through his wounds as he struggled to control it. Text prompts showed his thought process, and the interface explained permanent stat increases. The system listed changes and applied them. Strength rose by 3 and health rose by 2. Energy wrapped around his frame while the new power settled and pain gave way to steadier breath. The interface had confirmed a spirit absorption and applied permanent stat increases. Unknown youth felt power surge through his wounds from the burning orb at his chest. Energy wrapped his frame and the pain eased into a steadier breath. He watched blood streak his mouth as his blue eyes widened in shock. He thought energy filled his body and realized his stats had risen sharply. He remembered 7 long years without growth and felt relief wash over him. He knelt among wooden dummies and breathed raggedly while the change settled into his frame. The interface confirmed a new unique trait and displayed necromancy details to him. Energy from the burning orb had sealed into unknown youth's wounds and steadied his breathing. Blood stained his mouth, and unknown youth's blue eyes widened in shocked awe. Unknown youth thought that if he returned with the skull, he could become a hunter. A system prompt then appeared ordering him to move to the waiting room. A luminous portal opened on the sand and hummed with blue light. Unknown youth walked forward and watched the portal collapse the horizon into a narrow cavern. The interface confirmed his unique trait and showed necromancy details. Energy from the burning orb sealed into unknown youth's wounds and steadied his breathing. Blood stained his mouth and his eyes widened at the change. He thought bringing the skull could make him a hunter. A system prompt then directed him to the waiting room. A luminous portal appeared on the sand and hummed with blue light. He moved toward the opening as it narrowed the horizon. An attacker struck with a boot. He fell and crawled, panting about worsened injuries. After the boot hit him, he fell onto the sand and lay face up. A thin stream of blood leaked from his mouth and darkened the nearby sand. Then his breathing slowed while a strange energy stitched through his torn flesh. He blinked in disbelief while his deepest cuts sealed and old bruises faded. He pushed himself up and stood unsteady, testing his limbs and joints. Rain fell around him as he whispered that his injuries were healed. He wondered if trials restored bodies when completed and searched for answers. He glanced toward the narrowing portal and then at the room's lone bed. After the impact, the unknown youth lay on the narrow bed and breathed shallowly. A strange energy moved through him and sealed torn flesh, restoring his body. He pushed himself up and tested each limb until balance returned. He stared at the ceiling and felt uncertainty settle. Escape from the tower felt impossible as questions crowded his mind. He asked why the tower had summoned him and whether trials truly healed. Rain pattered against the room while he searched for answers. A sudden blue holographic interface activated above him and listed 5 available commands. He woke on a narrow bed with his wounds sealed by a strange energy. A blue holographic interface activated above him and listed 5 command words. He tested his limbs, steadied himself, and vowed to focus on survival first. He spoke the word trial, aloud as if to force an answer. The interface displayed a countdown for the second-floor trial, with hours remaining. It then refused selection and told him to wait until the timer expired. He realized the tower demanded repeated trials and mentioned a distant community. He woke with wounds sealed by a strange energy and a blue interface listing command words. He tested his limbs carefully and then spoke the command word trial aloud. The interface refused his selection and displayed a timer for the second-floor trial. He understood the tower required repeated trials and referenced a distant community. The communal chat filled with panicked messages from Lee Seungjin and others about lost stats. Unknown Youth read the feed and felt deep confusion about the rules. Then the system suddenly announced Admin XXX had entered and immediately disabled chat. He gasped aloud and stared at the notice on the interface in disbelief. He had woken with wounds sealed by the interface and had tested his limbs. He had spoken the command trial and watched the interface refuse, showing a timer for the second floor. The chat had been disabled when Admin XXX entered and announced critical information about points. The system defined points as a currency inside the tower that players could trade and use for goods. It warned that essentials like water required points and that points were only earned through trials. He absorbed the rules and resolved to climb the tower to secure points. He woke with wounds sealed by the interface and tested his limbs. He read the system rules and saw points were required for basic goods. Admin XXX announced limits, then exited, and the chat unlocked again. He realized points were the tower's currency and that trials granted them. He had hoped returning would make him a hunter, but felt defeated. He sat on the stairs and stared at the longsword propped against the wall. He judged the single blade insufficient and resolved to re-enter trials for points. He rose from the stairs and gripped a wooden shield and the longsword. He swung the blade in controlled arcs to test his balance and reach. He remembered that hunters lost their stats upon entering the tower and that known skills still required relearning. He assumed prior experience would ease retraining, but accepted veterans' advantage. He moved through footwork drills and repeated basic strikes until his arms ached. He vowed to train relentlessly to earn points and return stronger. He resolved to enter trials and secure measurable progress before facing others again. He had fallen onto the tiled floor and drew ragged breaths as pale light pulsed around his head. The waiting room's healing effect steadied his wounds and eased his pain. He flexed his fingers and sat up slowly to test balance. He rose to his feet and pronounced the recovery perfect. He remembered his lost stats and the need to relearn skills inside the tower. He tightened his shirt and planned focused drills to regain ability. He breathed deep and steadied his shoulders, resolved to convert this recovery into concrete progress before the next trial. Unknown Youth summoned his inventory interface and scanned the digital grid for provisions. He frowned and muttered about hunger while he examined the meager items available. He calculated remaining points and confirmed 40 points left after recent purchases. The inventory showed simple gear and food, but lacked funds for a proper shield. He chewed a ration and reflected on how bonus rewards had kept him afloat. A translucent panel then announced the second floor trial countdown with 17 minutes remaining. He noted time had slipped by faster than he expected and steadied his shoulders. He resolved to convert recovery into practice and relearn lost skills before the trial. Unknown Youth stood alone in the tiled chamber and faced the glowing exit beyond the wall. He had summoned his inventory, confirmed 40 points remained, and reviewed the meager gear and food. A translucent panel had announced the second floor trial countdown, with 17 minutes remaining. Time had slipped faster than he expected. He chewed a ration, steadied his shoulders, and asked himself if he could survive again. He rejected doubt with resolve, deciding to convert recovery into practice and relearn lost skills before the trial. Unknown Youth had steeled himself and readied his remaining supplies for the trial. A translucent interface counted down from 10 seconds with cold clinical clarity. Digits fell to 3, then 2, then 1 in vertical blue trails. When the timer hit 0, a confirmation window blinked into the chamber. It asked if he would accept the second floor trial with yes or no. He stared at the options and gathered himself for the necessary choice. The entire test now depended on his single selected command and his preparation behind it. After the confirmation window had accepted his choice, Unknown Youth was swept through a vertical corridor of light. He fell through blue trails and watched the ground pull away beneath him. The system interface announced his arrival on the second floor of the Tower of Trials. The display confirmed difficulty set to hard and revealed the trial subject as assassination. He landed in a quiet forest and steadied himself for the trial ahead. He muttered that it was a forest this time and readied his resolve. Unknown Youth steadied himself after arrival and prepared for the trial. The interface projected a blunt objective: assassinate the Orc tribe leader within the given time limit. A swarm of green-skinned warriors poured into view, eyes flaring and weapons brandished. The leader stood adorned with bone and a skull helm, commanding the surge. From the high ridge, the youth took in the encampment and the advancing charge. He inhaled once and set his stance, waiting for the first clash to decide the trial. Unknown Youth stood on the ridge and peered down into the encampment below. He saw a tide of green-skinned fighters pouring from tents and wagons. Orc warriors advanced, spears raised and banners snapping in the wind. A figure with a skull helm led their charge and drew all eyes. The interface had ordered the trial, but no system voice spoke on the slope. He inhaled and named the objective again in his mind. He felt the weight of the task and set his stance for the trial. Unknown Youth had taken his stance on the ridge and watched the encampment below. A wave of green-skinned orc warriors poured from tents with spears and banners, their skull-helmed leader drawing every eye. No system voice answered the slope despite the interface's order. The youth hid in foliage and measured the field. He named the objective again and recalled how dungeons often kept a guard or a hunter among orc tribes. He knew facing an orc hunter was dangerous. As the line closed, a red-eyed orc with a blade emerged, and the threat became immediate. Unknown Youth had watched the ridge and the encampment below from cover in foliage. He saw an orc warrior up close and judged the threat immediately. The slope held too many orc warriors for a lone attacker to win. No system voice answered despite the interface's order, so he drew on knowledge. He remembered that dungeons often kept a hunter and imagined a party of E-rank hunters. He pictured the small team and weighed his options before moving forward. He decided to retreat for now and return later with a plan. While he rested hidden, a sudden sound startled him and he flinched. Unknown Youth had flinched and then steadied himself. He realized there was a way to complete the trial, and the thought made him grin. He crawled from cover and produced a torch. He lit it and checked the flame. He gathered dry wood and cleared a small space to plan his next move. He told himself he could make enough firewood and buy time. With a torch in hand, he looked up the slope and prepared to act. Unknown Youth had steadied himself and prepared a simple plan to buy time. He lit a torch and checked the flame, then cleared a small space for work. He hurled the torch toward the glowing interface, aiming for a registration slot. The interface accepted the torch and displayed a confirmation, adding one torch to his inventory. The system message made him grin and eased his tension. He felt a small victory and used it to steel his resolve. He prepared to climb the slope and act on his plan. Unknown Youth had steadied himself and prepared a simple torch plan earlier. At dawn, he watched orc hunters stream through the clearing. Their calls marked a routine hunt, and their pace proved disciplined. He stayed hidden behind a tree and measured their timing. He expected them to return at sunset, so he had time to act. As dusk approached, many orcs reappeared, their eyes glowing red. A system message stated the trial required maximum difficulty and numerical inferiority. The warning underscored the danger he would face before it ended. Unknown Youth had steadied himself earlier and prepared a simple torch plan while he observed orc hunters stream through the clearing. He stayed hidden behind a tree and measured their timing until dusk, when many returned with red eyes. A system message warned the trial demanded maximum difficulty and numerical inferiority, underlining his danger. As flames descended across the sky, the element fire was declared, and he set his plan into motion. He fixed his gaze, ready to engage, while orc warriors called through the village and advanced along the path. Unknown Youth had watched the hunters' rhythms and planned a torch attack. At dusk, he lit a crude torch and slipped from cover toward the village. He darted along the path and hurled the flame ahead of him. The torch struck dry thatch and burst into roaring fire that climbed walls. He held his breath and kept moving as smoke billowed. The system's trial conditions weighed on him, demanding disadvantage and fire as the declared element. He relied on timing and risk to force the contest into chaos. Unknown Youth had slipped a crude torch into the village at dusk and ignited the thatch to force chaos. Flames ate the roofs and smoke mounted, while villagers and orc workers screamed and scattered. The blaze closed routes and threatened to cut off returning orc hunters. He counted on the fire and timed his strikes to exploit the trial's forced disadvantage. He aimed to kill at least 2 orc workers before hunters returned. The system's rules pressed on him, but his timing and risk kept him moving through smoke and ruin. Unknown Youth had set the village thatch alight at dusk to force disorder and openings. Smoke climbed while villagers and orc workers fled along blocked routes. He moved through ash and ruin, timing his strikes to the trial's constraints. By the river, he stalked a worker who lagged behind the others. The orc turned and made a questioning sound, a thin surprise cry. The youth lunged and drove a knife into the orc's neck, blood spattering water. He slipped away before hunters returned, keeping to the plan and the system's timing. Unknown Youth had set the village thatch alight at dusk and forced disorder among villagers. He had stalked and stabbed one of the orc workers by the river, then slipped away. The interface announced that the unique trait Necromancer F had now activated. It prompted him to choose whether to absorb the orc's spirit immediately. Unknown Youth accepted the prompt and drew the dark essence into his chest. He smiled and said that he had been waiting for this moment. The interface confirmed the absorption and raised his proficiency to 9%. He moved on keeping the new power as the trial's timing demanded. Unknown Youth moved through the ruined village as the trial's timing pushed him onward. An armored guard emerged beside a burning cart and challenged him in a low growl. He registered the threat, and his left eye flared with sudden blue light. He braced and unleashed a single brutal strike aimed at the guard's head. The blow smashed through armor and sent the guard reeling with a guttural scream. He kept his face neutral and continued on as the wreckage smoked around him. Unknown Youth had moved through the ruined village and shattered the armored guard's defense. He drew in trapped spirits and shouted a strained command as the system interface announced permanent stat increases. Blue light pulsed through his left eye as strength rose by 4 and agility rose by 2. A nearby orc hunter lunged with red eyes and snarled. He met the attack and converted the new power into a brutal counterstrike that cleaved through armor. He kept his face neutral and pressed onward through smoke and wreckage. Unknown youth moved through the ruined village and broke the guard's defense. He pulled trapped spirits into himself as the interface registered new stat gains. Blue light pulsed through his left eye while an orc hunter lunged and fell to his counterstrike. Flames rose behind scattered corpses. The interface then notified that fast recovery had been revitalized. He used stored spirits to trigger permanent stat increases and felt the change. He noted the risk and thought carelessness would have killed him. He kept his face neutral and pressed onward through smoke. Unknown youth had pushed through the ruined village and broken the guard's defense earlier. He had absorbed trapped spirits while the interface logged new stat gains. Blue light pulsed from his left eye after he countered the orc hunter. Flames climbed behind the scattered corpses. The interface reported fast recovery restored and recorded permanent increases. In this panel, the interface flashed stamina, strength, and agility increases. He noted the guard's contribution and judged fighting guards less dangerous. He kept his face neutral and continued onward through the smoke. Unknown youth moved through the ruined village and into the burning tree line. Flames rose ahead while embers drifted through smoke. Orc workers fled and screamed at his approach. The interface had already recorded stamina, strength, and agility increases and fast recovery activation. He counted targets silently, noting 3 workers and 1 guard among the scattered corpses. Blue light pulsed in his left eye after the orc hunter clash. He kept his face neutral and walked toward the fire, judgment fixed on the next threat. Unknown youth advanced from the ruined village into a tree line that still burned. Flames and drifting embers blocked portions of his view. Orc workers fled and screamed at his approach. The interface had already recorded increased stamina strength and agility and activated fast recovery. He counted 3 workers and 1 guard amid the corpses, and a blue light pulsed in his left eye after the orc hunter clash. A horned old clan head led a renewed charge. He planned to handle the guard first. After absorbing the guard, the workers posed no threat, and he struck with precise speed. Unknown youth moved out from the ruined village into a tree line still smoldering. Flames and drifting embers blurred his sight while orc workers fled and screamed around him. The interface noted higher stamina and agility and engaged fast recovery. A blue light glowed in his left eye after the previous clash with an orc hunter. He found 3 workers and a guard among the dead and focused on the guard first. He absorbed the guard, then struck with precise speed. His eye flared as he lunged and split a horned orc, sending it airborne. He raised a shield and took a heavy counterstrike while bracing through the impact. Unknown youth left the ruined village and moved into a tree line still smoldering. Flames and embers blurred his vision while fleeing workers screamed around him. The interface noted higher stamina and engaged fast recovery, and a blue light glowed in his left eye. He found several bodies, focused on the armored guard, and used absorption to take its power before striking. The guard had detached from the clan head and became the last obstacle. He lunged through fire, slashing with precise speed as birds cried overhead. His eye flared and he shouted as the blade cut through armor. Unknown youth fled into the tree line while embers blurred his vision and workers screamed. The interface noted increased stamina and engaged fast recovery with blue light in his eye. He found bodies and focused on the armored guard as the last obstacle. He absorbed the guard's power, then lunged through flames, slashing with precise speed. The blade tore armor, the guard bled and collapsed as birds cried above. A high keening rang out, and a fiery vortex spun behind a horned figure watching. Unknown youth stood amid smoke, his eye still glowing after the strike. Unknown youth stood on the hulking creature's head, blade drawn and small shield raised. He bled from a recent strike, while the interface's blue light pulsed in his eye. He had absorbed the guard's strength and moved with sharpened speed through the battle. The monster collapsed beneath his feet as his blade sheared through its armor and jaw. Behind him, a horned figure watched while a fiery vortex spun and exploded, blasting other attackers aside. Smoke and embers filled the air, Unknown Youth remained standing amid ruin and a ringing keening. Unknown Youth had stood on the creature's head with blade and small shield, blood tracking from a fresh wound, while the interface pulsed in his eye. He had absorbed the guard's strength and moved with sharpened speed, toppling the monster beneath him. A horned figure watched nearby as a fiery vortex spun and exploded. The horned figure then unleashed a concentrated vertical beam of fire. The beam carved a searing column through smoke and embers and slammed downward toward Unknown Youth. He cried out and braced beneath the inferno as the blast struck, debris and ash raining around him while light flared. After the fire slammed down, Unknown Youth remained standing amid smoke and falling ash. The orc tribe leader's mouth opened in a startled shriek. He watched the lone figure in the blaze. Unknown Youth staggered forward, clutching blade and battered shield. Blood streaked his face and armor. A system window from the interface materialized, announcing an achievement. The message declared he had earned the one who endures fire. Another notice created the skill Fire Resistance, F. The orc tribe leader's expression shifted from rage to shock. Unknown Youth breathed through pain and braced to act again. After the achievement windows appeared, Unknown Youth staggered through smoke and ash. He had earned the one who endures fire and gained fire resistance. The orc tribe leader reeled at the unexpected survival. Unknown Youth breathed through pain and steadied his stance. Blood streaked his cheek, and his blue eyes flared with focused fury. He leaned forward, teeth bared, and shouted, "You're dead." His shout cut across the ruins and signaled he would strike again. The orc tribe leader's shock widened as the youth readied himself. Achievement windows flickered as Unknown Youth pushed through choking smoke and falling ash. He staggered, clutching a scorched shield and a blood-smeared blade, refusing to fall. The interface announced the achievement, the one who endures fire, and created Fire Resistance Level 1. Flames licked the ruins, and embers drifted through the air around his stance. The orc tribe leader gaped, eyes widening in startled disbelief at the youth's survival. Unknown Youth's blue eyes burned with focused fury, despite his wounds and fatigue. He leaned forward, bared his teeth, and issued a raw death threat that echoed across the wreckage. Achievement windows flashed as Unknown Youth forced through choking smoke and falling ash. He staggered, clutching his scorched shield and bloodied blade, and refused to fall. The interface announced the one who endures fire and granted Fire Resistance Level 1. Flames licked the rubble around him. The orc tribe leader gaped at his survival. Unknown Youth's blue eyes burned with focused fury, and he bared his teeth to issue a raw death threat.